Why do some people avoid using the trailing comma in their SQL code like this? When you look at this code here, it is really hard to spot where all the commas are at, and it just doesn't make it look nice and clean. Every line item that you're seeing here looks like it's its own field that's going to be output from the database, but that's not necessarily true. When you look at lines 5 through 16, it looks like these are all fields that will be output from the database. However, when we get down to lines 19 through 24, the situation changes a bit. When you look at these longer lines, you can't make as quick of a determination of, is this a new field or is this a continuation of the previous field? So when you start reading line 20, you have to read it all the way to the end, determine, yes, that is one field. Then you drop down and you start reading line 21 and you read through it, but then you get to the end of line 22 and there's a comma. So the question here is this the end of a field and is line 23 its own output field, or is that just a continuation of the previous line? Plus, in most text editors, that white comma blends in with the white text, and that is going to make it harder for you to spot those commas or any missing commas. But if you flip over to using a leading comma, the code looks a lot nicer to read, and it's a lot quicker for you to read and spot bugs. Here we have the exact same code with the leading comma in place, and you can see how you have this really nice vertical alignment, and whenever you see a leading comma, you know that it is the start of a new field that's going to be output from the database. This makes it a lot easier to see the start of the logic behind a new output field that you have, and there's no guessing involved. But when I flip back to the trailing comma, it's not as clean of code that you're looking at here, and it's really hard to spot any bugs. Now, even if we ignore the cleaner UI, when you're using that trailing comma, you're going to likely have more runtime bugs than had you used the leading comma. What usually happens in practice is that someone will want to come along, delete out this block of code here, and they're going to run this and it will error out because there's a trailing comma on line 32. So then what they'll do is they'll fix this, they'll remove that comma, and then they'll run it again and it'll succeed. But then they might come back around and need to add in those extra lines of code later. So they start coming in here, type in their code, and now they have a bug because again, they didn't put the comma back on line 32. However, when you're working with the leading comma, you could come in here, delete this code out, run it, and you're not going to run into any runtime bugs. Then if you wanted to add that information back in, you know that you always have to start with the leading comma and you're going to enter in your code, and you never have to think, do I need to go back up to line 32 and put in another comma?